We've been talking about the Zoe life. Let me give you a definition here of our Zoe life here. Zoe life, that's Greek word number 2222. That is all life is derived and comes from and is sustained by God's self-existent life. And so the Lord has intimately shared his gift of life, Zoe life, with those that have believed, obviously, and has created us in his image, which now has given us the capacity to experience what I like to call the eternal life of knowing him. And so from Blue Letter Bible, that's the state of one who is possessed of vitality, and then, of course, is being animated. It's that absolute fullness of life. It's real and genuine life, again, with God as a source. So within that, as we've been talking about the Zoe life, we've been looking at describers. We looked at the describer eternal. And then today is a part 3 here, as we've been looking at this describer of abundant or abundance. And so in any event, that adjective abundant is Greek word number 4053. I gave that definition at the part 1. I didn't in part 2. Let me go ahead and read that through that again. You've got this. It's derived, first of all, from number 4012, which is peri, meaning all around excess. And then properly, it's all around, more than abundant, beyond what is anticipated, exceeding expectation, more abundant, going past the expected limit. And so our verse there is John chapter 10, verse 10. That's when Jesus says, the thief comes to steal and kill and destroy. I came that they might have life and have it abundantly, or have it to the full. And so then what we did yesterday in part 2 was we looked at the verb here, which is number 4052. We had like 39 uses of this, and we kind of cut through about half of those. We're not looking at all of these, but I wanted to give you a good flavor. So let me give you now the definition of this. This was pretty lengthy, but I think it's kind of good to see. And then you'll see this as well as we go through 8-9 passages today. Again, here's that word is number 4052. To exceed a fixed number, a measure, to be left over and above a certain number, a measure, to be over, to remain, to exist, or to be at hand in abundance. It's to be great, a thing which comes in abundance or overflows unto one, abundance, to abound, to overflow, to be abundant, to be furnished with, to have abundance, to excel more than, and to exceed, to make abound, to make one, to furnish one richly so that he has abundance. We're going to see that as it relates to ministry. The Spirit was always providing abundance through the saints. And to make abundant and to excel. So, all right, guys, well, let's get going here in our uses today. Let's see here. We're going to start off in 2 Corinthians chapter 8, verse 2. 2 Corinthians chapter 8, verse 2, he says that in a great ordeal of affliction, their abundance of joy and their deep poverty overflowed in the wealth of liberality. So that word overflowed, that's our word here, number 4052. So again, that abundance of joy, even though they were in deep poverty, they overflowed in their wealth of liberality. We're really talking about here in 2 Corinthians chapter 8 and also chapter 9, this gracious giving that was occurring by the Spirit. And so we're to be givers from the Spirit with him as source, not giving under compulsion, grudgingly under compulsion, but giving with a cheerful heart. And so here's a few verses later, 2 Corinthians 8:7. But just as you abound, there's our word, just as you abound, abundant in everything, in faith and utterance and knowledge and in all earnestness and in love, we inspired in you, see that you abound in this gracious work also. So you can see here, you got faith and utterance and knowledge and earnestness all being coupled. Abound in everything, abound in this gracious work. And so again, the early church was there all participating, giving. So that these needs of the saints could be met and the gospel could go out into all of the land. So now let's look at 2 Corinthians 9:8. We have about four here that are really kind of related to giving. 2 Corinthians 9:8 says, and God is able to make all grace abound. There's our word, abound. And you see, we got the abundant life here. We see abundant grace. God is able to make all grace abound to you, so that always having all sufficiency in everything, you may have abundance for every good deed. Now, if you go back even to when Jesus had the 70 at first initially go out, he told them to take nothing with you. He's like, go to them and enter into the households that receive you. If they don't receive you, you dust off your feet and move on to the next one. But even in that particular instance, they had all of their needs met. And so here he's saying, abound in grace, and then that abundance that you're going to have for every good deed. This is something the Spirit wants to provide. Here's 2 Corinthians 9:12. For the ministry of this service is not only fully supplying the needs of the saints, but it is also overflowing. There we are, overflowing through many thanksgivings to God. So the ministry of service, there was a full supply to all the need of the saints. And this overflowed with thanksgiving. You got to love when you see just an overflow that leads to thanksgiving. That's just the real joy of the Spirit that's coming out of us. Now we're going to go to Ephesians 1:8. Let me turn there here, even in my Bible. In Ephesians 1:8, it's really important to read verse 7 here, because that's really what the start of this is. He says, in him we have redemption through his blood, the forgiveness of our trespasses. And how is that? Well, that's according to the riches of his grace. And then as we move on from there, which he lavished upon us. When we've all read that verse, but when we hear that lavished upon us, that's our word here. Number 4052 of this kind of abundance and this abounding and this overflow. And so that was lavished on us. Again, this is really that, I think it's John chapter 1, about verses 14 or 15, maybe 16 and 17, somewhere in there. But it's like, of his fullness we've received, and grace upon grace. And I always like to say grace upon grace upon grace upon grace, because we have those four promises and provisions. So that was Ephesians 1:8. And then our next use I wanted to look at, you could go look at Philippians 1:9 and Philippians 1:26 on your own. I'm going to jump to Philippians 4:12. Here's more about living in prosperity. He says, I know how to get along with humble means, Paul speaking, and also I know how to live in prosperity. There's our word for abundance. In any and every circumstance, I have learned the secret of being filled and going hungry, both of having abundance, there's our word, and suffering need. And so Paul had learned the contentment there of what that abundance that he could sometimes had, other times he was suffering amidst need. And now we have Philippians 4:18. He says, but I have received everything in full, and I have an abundance. He had gotten a gift here from another church. And he says, I am amply supplied, having received from Epaphroditus what you have sent, a fragrant aroma, an acceptable sacrifice, well-pleasing to God. So this literal gift that is sustaining Paul in his ministry endeavors and work, he's saying, man, it was a fragrant aroma. It was an acceptable sacrifice, well-pleasing to God. This is what abundance is for us, guys. And now we have Colossians chapter 2, verse 7. He says, having been firmly rooted and now being built up in him and established in your faith, just as you were instructed, and overflowing with gratitude. And so we're talking about, that rooted and grounded, both really in love and in faith. And he's like, and you were instructed, and now you're overflowing in abundance. That's our word, with gratitude. All right. And then we have a few more uses here. We're going to look in 1 Thessalonians chapter 3, verse 12. And here it says, and may the Lord cause you to increase and abound in love for one another. So where we see it's the Lord, probably the Spirit as well, since the fruit of the Spirit is love. But he says, may the Lord cause you to increase and abound in love for one another and all the people, just as you were also doing. And then what we see here is we're in First Thessalonians is we see this excelling, even though the church is doing well. This is, again, First Thessalonians this is Paul's first letter. This is probably around 45, 46 AD. And he's really encouraging them. He's complimenting them on what he sees, and then he's encouraging you, do more, have more, be more. He says, finally, then, brethren, we request and exhort you in the Lord Jesus that as you receive from us instruction, so as how to one ought to walk and to please God, just as you are actually doing, that you excel still more. All right. And then our last use is 1 Thessalonians 4:10. And I want to read the verse before here. He says, now, as to the love of the brethren, you have no need for anyone to write to you. How about that? They were doing so well in love. There's no need to write them about that. He says, for you yourselves are taught by God to love one another. For indeed, you do practice it towards all the brethren who are in Macedonia. But we urge you, brethren, to excel still more. And so there we see this excelling still more and more. So we have an abundant life, right? The life with God as a source. It is an abundant life. And yet, even as we begin to experience the abundant life, it's this grace upon grace. It's excel more and more in that. And Paul was always desiring that. That's the real fruit of the Spirit. So, all right, guys. Well, this ends this episode 49 today on your Nourishing Nugget at Noon. We will start to venture into our next describer, which will be the describer imperishable. Mark with Jesus' New Covenant. Thanks for